In 1983, an Oregon mom named Diane Downs pulled her car over to the side of a road and shot her three young children in the back seat. Then she claimed she was the victim of a carjacking. For years, Diane Downs seemed to have a wonderful life. She was married to her high school sweetheart, worked part-time at a local thrift store, and had three children, Christy Ann, Cheryl Lynn, and Stephen Daniel. But that idyllic image shattered in the early 1980s. Born on August 7, 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona, Elizabeth Diane Downs appeared to have a normal childhood. Behind the closed doors, however, she was being molested by her father, Wesley Linden, as early as the age of 12, while he and her mother, Willa Dane, portrayed themselves as upstanding conservatives. As a freshman at Moon Valley High School, Downs dressed like a grown woman of the 1960s and dated older boys. One of them was Stephen Downs, from whom she became inseparable as the pair roved the streets of Phoenix looking for fun. The two would graduate together but briefly part as Diane Downs enrolled at Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College in Orange, California, and Steve enlisted in the US Navy. But Downs would ultimately be expelled after a year for promiscuous behavior. Reunited in Arizona, she then ran away from home and married husband Stephen Downs on November 13, 1973, with whom she had three children, Christy Ann, Cheryl Lynn, and Stephen Danny Daniel. Almost immediately after marriage, however, their relationship began to suffer privately. The couple regularly argued about financial issues and fought over alleged infidelities. It was into this environment that Christy, Cheryl Lynn, and Stephen Daniel Danny were born in 1974, 1976, 1979 respectively. By the time Danny was born, arguments over infidelities had become so intense that Steve became convinced that Danny wasn't his biological son at all, but the product of an affair. Incapable of reconciling, the couple divorced in 1980. The 25-year-old divorcee tried hard to become a surrogate, but failed her psychiatric test twice. Diane Downs became increasingly negligent of her kids. She often left them with her parents or ex-husband without much notice, seemingly indifferent, and more interested in the affection of other men. Her children were often seen unkempt and appeared malnourished. Downs would routinely leave Christy in charge of her other two kids when the girl was only 6 years old. In 1981, however, she met Robert Nick Knickerbocker and embarked on an affair that waved her troubles away. For Knickerbocker, who was married, Diane Downs' children were equivalent of too many strings attached. He told Downs he had no interest in being a daddy and ended the affair. Within 2 years, she would attempt to murder her own kids in the hopeful pursuit of regaining his affection. In April 1983, Diane Downs moved to Springfield, Oregon and got a job as a postal worker. Then on May 19, 1983, she drove her children down Old Mohawk Road just outside of town, pulled over to the side of the road and shot each of her kids with a .22 caliber pistol. She then drove at a pace of between 5 to 7 mph to the local hospital, according to the witnesses, where she then claimed to the hospital staff she had been carjacked by a stranger who shot herself and her children. By the time Diane Downs arrived at the hospital, Cheryl, 7, was already dead, and the other two children suffered devastating injuries. Authorities became suspicious of Downs almost immediately, describing how she was strangely calm when she arrived at the hospital. Officers launched an investigation into her strange behavior, which included phoning her lover once she arrived at the hospital, her children citing they were scared of their mother, and Christy Ann reacting in a terrified manner when her mother visited her in the hospital. Knickerbocker also told authorities he feared Downs would try and kill his wife and that she had stalked him. Cops said they found no gunshot residue that would point to Downs' version of events, as well as blood splatters, which were inconsistent with the theory. And when Christie regained her speech, the facts were clear. When asked who shot her, the girl replied simply, "My mom." Diane Downs had tried to murder her own kids and drive slowly to the hospital in the hopes they would bleed out. And in 1984, Diane Downs was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. She was arrested in the following February and sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. Psychiatrists also diagnosed her with a raft of mental health issues. Diane gave birth to a fourth child, Amy, after her trial. Downs is serving time in the Valley State Prison for Women. She was found guilty of murder and 2 counts each of attempted murder and criminal assault after her daughter, Christie, gave evidence at her trial. Downs escaped from the Oregon Women's Correctional Center on July 11, 1987, and was recaptured in Salem, Oregon on July 21 after going on the run. She received a 5-year additional sentence for the escape. She was denied parole in 2008 and 2010. Downs was eligible to apply for parole in the late 2020.